Good evening, everyone. I'm David Chalmers. As many of you will know, I'm the chair of the Liberal Democrat European Group, who this evening are bringing this discussion to tonight. And I'm really honoured to have with us tonight Leonid Volkov. And Leonid was born into Soviet Jewish intelligentsia, leading Russian opposition figure. He's now in exile in Lithuania. And through lawyers, he liaises with one of Russia's most prominent political prisoners, his friend Alexei Navalny, who is serving 9 years in a maximum security prison in Russia. Leonid was Navalny's chief of staff for his Moscow mayoral campaign in 2013 and his presidential campaign against Vladimir Putin in 2018, when the two friends founded the Russia's Future Party. From exile and prison, they and others are preparing for Putin's fall and the creation of a modern, more peaceful Russia. The discussion tonight, I mean, obviously almost a year on from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, gives a real sort of poignancy to be able to have this discussion this evening with Leonid. As Rob has pointed out, would you please put any questions you have into the Q&A? There will be Humphrey Hawksley, who's a member of our the Liberal Democrat European Group's executive, will be interviewing Leonid for the first sort of half an hour, 45 minutes, and then I'll come in with Q&A and we can actually have a discussion around some of the other points. So I'm really looking forward to this evening. I'm sure many of you are too. We've got a lot of people here who have signed up tonight, and it's a great honor for us to be able to hold this debate tonight. So over to Leonid and Humphrey. Thank you.
Leonid, so good to see you again. Hi.
Likewise, and thank you for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here tonight, and well, albeit in this virtual format, it's still very nice that we have an opportunity to have this conversation. The most interesting part is normally the Q&A, actually, so I'm eager to jump there as soon as possible, like to answer the questions of the audience. But of course, I know, Humphrey, you also have some questions for me, and
yes, I'm going to use my privilege as the interviewer to ask you, and this also ground the discussion in a way, Leonid, because we've talked a few times before and some very interesting points have come out. But firstly, tell us, how is Alexei Navalny at the moment? Because his health is deteriorating, we hear, so tell us the latest.
Yeah, not good. So he's in a solitary confinement since August last year, so for 5 months. And like when he was put there in this punishment cell, which is like 2.5 by 3.5 meters large, the doctor's prediction was that in 3 to 6 months it will have a very bad impact on his health. And so it happened. So the doctors were right. So after 5 months, which fits perfectly, unfortunately, in this kind of 3 to 6, his health started to deteriorate, and he really needs medical assistance now. And well, there is nothing like a healthcare system there in a Russian prison facility, and they're not allowing doctors from outside the facility to visit him. So the situation is actually very, very concerning. Like, we are really very concerned. Now, there is not much we can do, but well, we had a plan to launch this like large international Free Navalny campaign on January 17th. So actually, coincidence that when he fell ill, we were ready to launch this campaign, and we hope that now this campaign might help us to like soften the conditions, or like to make doctors admit to him, something like that.
Okay, because I understand, wasn't it 500 doctors wrote a letter to Vladimir Putin to give him medicine?
610 doctors, very brave people, signed for like a petition to Vladimir Putin with their names and affiliations, which is very important. Most of these doctors working in Russia in state-owned healthcare system, and So they're like literally risking their jobs, at least. And still they signed this petition, which actually like helped at least a little bit. So something is happening. Like some guy came to visit him like yesterday from like a large prison hospital, and it looks like things might get better, but well, it's too early to call.
It is. Take us back how you and Alexei Navalny forged your very powerful political movement and that sort of thing. And how important is he now as a figure for future of Russia?
Oh, yeah, he's very important. I believe he is actually like the hope for the future of Russia. We met in 2010. I was a member of city council in my hometown of Yekaterinburg, the only independent member of city council. Alexei Navalny was just like a prominent blogger, like well known, but just like a blogger who was actually like blogging about corruption. But soon after that, we launched the Anti-Corruption Foundation, which became the most important and influential Russian NGO, like non-government organization, and also a political organization, because corruption is not just a crime in Russia. It's not just like an abuse of power. It's the lifestyle of the Russian elite, and it's the essence of power. Like everything in Putin land is built around corruption and is running on corruption and because of corruption. Like corruption exists in many countries around the world. It's normal. I mean, it's not normal, but it happens that in some country they build like a school or a bridge, like, and the contractor tries to steal some money.
It falls down.
Yeah, but in Russia, it's not so easy to comprehend for people in the West. But the things are designed differently. Huge projects are started for the sake of corruption. So no one actually cares about if the bridge or the school at the end of the day will be delivered. Everyone really cares about the ability to steal money, which this project presents to them. So that's how Putin's system operates. Like everyone is. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to get something because we have a mindset here in the West, which I think is quite interesting here, is that your catalyst to what you did was corruption and anti-corruption. It wasn't necessarily democracy and elections, although I know the two missed, but it was. Is that right or wrong?
No. So just that we've been targeting this very essential like cornerstone of Putin's political system. It is because of the enormous corruption, enormous, like you can't imagine its scale. It is because of this enormous corruption that they had to demolish independent courts because they couldn't afford to be challenged in courts. It was because of this enormous corruption that had to start to rig elections because they can't allow to get outvoted in the elections. It is because of the enormous corruption that they like shut down all the independent press because they can't afford to get investigated by the press. So that's how it happened. That's how the political system in Russia deteriorated over the last like 15 years or 20 years, like enormously, and led us to where we are now, to this atrocious war, to all the war crimes and so on, because it's a very important thing. That's how it all started. The enormous corruption led to deteriorating living standards. The average household income in Russia decreases for 10 years in a row now, like from 2013 to 2023. Like people are just getting poorer and poorer every year. And of course, no one likes it. And it affects like Putin's approval rating. It affects his popularity. And according to state-owned polling institutions, Putin's approval rating for the first time in his life, in his political life, went below 50% in fall 2013, when the corruption became so large that it led to like economic decline that everyone was able to feel. And then a miracle came and saved Putin, which was a Crimea adventure. The Maidan revolution in Ukraine presented him with an opportunity, like to capture Crimea, to annex it, and it suddenly resulted in an enormous boost in approval rating, because like no blood was shed. His propaganda machine was able to market the annexation of Crimea as something like very good, as a like restoration of historical justice, because like Khrushchev handed Crimea to Ukraine, and so on and so on. No, doesn't matter. Like his approval rating like boosted to 85% or so, which gave him and his entourage an enormous opportunity to continue stealing, because people loved them. And then, of course, over the course of the next 10 years, it came down, 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 and down. And for the second time in his life, it went below 50% in fall 2020-21. But he already knew what can save him, what can help him, what is the magical pill. He already had this experience. He decided that like the small victorious war is his magical pill.
And that's a very succinct way of actually explaining how the whole Ukraine element happened. But you and Alexei, going back 10 or so years, you bypassed a lot of this stuff by using the internet, didn't you? By streaming. Explain how that happened.
Yeah, of course. Well, this was kind of like forced when we started to like engage politically. All the state media have been already like all the traditional media have been already entirely like put under governmental control. Like there were no independent newspaper or no independent TV station. So we had to operate on the internet. We weren't like invited to like for an interview to like state TV channels, so on. So we had to navigate around, and the internet was like a relatively free space at that point of time, like back 11 or 12 years ago. So we started to make use of it, to reach out to our supporters, to promote our cause, to campaign against corruption, and then to promote our political campaigns, and so on.
And when you were elected as city councillor, you were the only councillor in the city that was not in the Putin camp. How was that for you? Was that dangerous at that time?
No. It's actually a very clear understanding of. It gives a very clear understanding of how Russia's political system really deteriorated in a very short like time span, because at that point of time it was absolutely okay. So it was, yeah, my colleagues like respected me, because, well, you can say things we are not allowed to say loud. So and it was absolutely okay to be a dissident, to be an elected official, not belonging to Putin's party, and so on. Now it's like entirely impossible, of course.
Yes. Now we're all hoping at some stage that Russia begins to emerge from this dark patch that it's in now. You, Alexei, and others will be leading that, certainly with the ideas. Exactly, could you give us as much of a detailed blueprint as you have as to how that might happen?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And for a good question, there is normally no easy and short answer. So, right. I mean, there is always a short and wrong one, but we are not looking for answers of this sort.
But you're sort of when we first met, you said, in better days that you were talking to Alexei about blueprints and plans and what to do. Yeah.
Well, we believe, of course, change is not possible while Putin is there. So Putinism is an authoritarianism. It's a very personal system of rule. It's all based on Putin's personal ties with his lieutenants, with his entourage, with his oligarchs and government officials. So I don't see how Putinism can survive after Putin, like just because all of his lieutenants really hate each other, compete against each other, and I don't think there is a way how the system can find another point of stability, like after Putin is gone. So the first precondition, which necessarily has to be fulfilled to allow us to speak about the transition to like a better and democratic Russia is, of course, like to get rid of Putin. But that's quite a task. That's quite a task. And
but let us assume.
No. Just a second. I don't believe there is a silver bullet. There is like just a simple solution. If there were one, it would probably already be implemented. Contrary, I believe in hard labor and patience. Pressure has to be applied on Putin from all possible directions. Putin has to be put under all possible stress, and people under stress tend to make mistakes, and we have to make use of these mistakes. I see at least 3 different directions where pressure can be applied from, which is, of course, like the military dimension of this war. Like, well, I mean, of course, the most important things are happening on the front line, and Ukrainians are paying the most bloody toll and the largest toll above everyone. But then there is the economic dimensions, like the sanctions, the economic pressure on Putin's elite, on everyone around him, which has to aim to kind of introduce turbulence, to alienate his, to antagonize Putin with his elite. And then, of course, we have to work with Russia's population. We have to win the information war. We have to reach out to them. We have to talk to them. That's what we are doing. That's where we are.
Are you doing that now?
Active.
Are you managing to reach people in Russia now?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So we run a network of YouTube channels which are countering Putin's television propaganda, which are telling the truth, which are explaining like all the narratives about the war, just like broadcasting the actual information. We are now reaching about 15 million unique viewers a month in Russia, which is like almost comparable with the reach of the largest state-owned broadcasters. So actually, this kind of like competition in terms of like information and winning attention and support of Russian citizens is enormously important, because it also undermines Putin's ability to continue with his aggression. So like army is part of the society. The morale of the army depends on the morale of society. If there is no support, Putin cannot mobilize more troops. Putin's soldiers are not fighting. And this is actually already happening. We see a lot of it. But imagine...
So I just want to say, let us take a situation where Putin suddenly goes. The Berlin Wall suddenly fell, or nobody was prepared for it, but it did happen. And we talked about those institutions, the military, the media, the government, that are all now embedded with Putin's corruption. How do you manage to bring those institutions around to support what you want for Russia as to be a modern democratic nation? I mean, that's a big problem, isn't it?
It is. It is, of course, and every month or every year of Putinism makes this problem more and more complicated. But well, we actually believe we are able to solve it. Like last time when Alexei Navalny was allowed to be on the ballot was the Moscow mayoral election of 2013. And he was allowed to be on the ballot because of the fact that he was polling at 3% at the time they were like admitting candidates to be on the election. And the incumbent mayor of Moscow, Sergei Sobyanin, was polling at 75. And the election was like 2.5 months ahead of us. And then we were just campaigning. We put together a program. We attracted young volunteers. Like we built a technology-driven, energetic campaign in Moscow, in a city of like 12 million people. And in 3 months, well, the outcome was 45 to 36. Like Alexei Navalny finished second, but it was very far from 75 to 3. It was like 45 to 36. And well, after that, he was never anymore allowed to campaign, because he has proven, we have proven that we are very much capable of doing it. And they believe that when Putin is gone, like for whatever reason, his lieutenants will start fighting against each other. No one of them is strong enough to take over. They really they hate each other, and no one of them controls more than like 10% of power in the country, which will present us with, well, with a window of opportunity. We have many supporters. We have like a large network of supporters and activists within the country that we've built during the last 10 years. We are able to connect to them. And I believe that when this moment comes, well, they will be able to demand for a peaceful transition, for a competitive election, and so on and so on. And well, we know how to campaign, we know how to operate.
Because I mean, all over the world, if you take Iraq, you take the failure in Afghanistan, if you take the Philippines, Indonesia, all these places that have tried to go from dictatorship to democracy, they all go through hurdles, including Russia in the early 90s, you know, which you know, we all remember, and you were a younger man then, but you remember too. How do you get through that without the sort of turmoil, violence, and uncertainty? Is there a way to get through that?
Well, we have to hope there is a way. We have to hope there is like a democratic future for Russia. Actually, well, when Alexei Navalny tried to get himself registered to be on the ballot for 2018 presidential election, which he was never allowed to participate, and we put together like a large program of reforms, including like the constitutional reform, the centralization of the country, huge reform of law enforcement, of judiciary, and so on. Like it was like really lengthy, prepared together by like best political scientists in Russia and abroad, like economists like Sergei Guriev, who was at that point of time the chief economist of the EBRD, and so on and so on. Of course, no one reads those lengthy programs, but they actually
you know
exist.
them. I mean, you have them in the bullet points, do you?
Yes. But we actually have an action plan for the country. And I want to make one more remark, which I really find very important. I think that the belief, the trust in the democratic future of Russia is very essential, enormously essential for success of Ukraine and to end the war, because there is a narrative, a very dangerous one and stupid one, that like that Russians are not capable to have democracy, that they are all imperialistic, that they are like genetically not ready to have a democracy. There was never a democracy in Russia and never have been. It's wrong. Like, I mean, it's the same as to say that Koreans or Germans are like destined for a dictatorship based on like Eastern Germany and North Korea. But there are Germans and Koreans who were able to prove the opposite. But apart from being wrong, this narrative, which is actually now quite omnipresent, helps Putin a lot. Because speaking logically, if we side with this narrative, then we have to accept that even when Putin is gone, even if Putin is gone, there will be another Putin, there will be another emperor, and Russia will remain like an aggressive fascist dictatorship, dangerous to its neighbors. Then we have to come to a conclusion that we have to negotiate with Putin, because, okay, at least we know him, we are able to talk to him, and if the only possible continuation for Russia is like replacement of Putin with a different version of Putin and not with a democracy, then we'd rather better deal with this one, we negotiate, we concede, we give him what he wants, we try to appease him, and so on. Because, well, otherwise, after a lot of fighting and a lot of like enormous death toll, we will just have to face another one who might be even worse, and so on. So this logic that Russia can't be a democracy will ultimately lead us to, of course, a very bad and wrong conclusion that we better negotiate with this dictator now, and we stop like helping Ukraine militarily, because at the end of the day, there is no other perspective. Contrary to that, if we believe, just the last point. Contrary to that, if we believe that actually there is a better alternative for Russian future, then it makes sense to aim for to help Ukraine win the war, because of course it's quite clear that like military victory will probably lead to end of Putinism and to transition Russia.
So give me a pen picture of your vision of Russia that, you know, a few years from now you've managed to get through and do all that. I mean, as far as NATO goes, as far as the EU goes, as far as the World Trade Organization goes, give us a picture of where you want Russia to be.
Well, in 2 years, Russia will not be in EU or NATO. It's quite clear. I can't see such a scenario, maybe even not in 10 years from now. Russia is still on the World Trade Organization, by the way. It has not been expelled from the WTO, so here we don't have a problem. In a few years, we consider Russia to be a European country. That's the baseline. That's the basic idea of our political movement. Like for Russia to become like a European democracy, which means institutions. Like when I say like Russia has to become a European country, people would ask like, is it a definition? They are so different. I mean, UK and Greece, or like I don't know, Lithuania and Portugal, or like Denmark, they are so different. But the difference, it depends on the viewpoint actually. I mean, you know this, of course, you know this, like political compass, like the political plane, like liberal to authoritarian, like conservative to liberal, like left to right, where you can like answer some questions and find where you don't belongs on this like political map. And every European country and every European political party finds itself somewhere on this like quadrangle, like more to the left, more to the right. And citizens have tools to move this dot. Like, okay, we can vote and move to the left or to the right or to the green or like to the liberal and so on. So people have tools to navigate this political plane, which are like free and fair elections, free press, independent courts, and so on. Russian citizens don't have any of them. They are deprived of all these tools for the last 20 years, which means that from our viewpoint, so this square, from our viewpoint, and we are somewhere like there, looks like a dot. Our the aim, the goal of our political movement is to move Russia from there, here, somewhere on this plane, which is like to enable Russian citizens to decide their future, where they want to go to, which is to rebuild political institutions.
So you know, in the past, there's this thing about the West or liberal democracy. We are the liberal Democrats, so say the liberal Democrats pushing for things to move too quickly, or not pushing enough.
Yes, of course.
What can we do? What is the best thing we can do to move this on, or to help move this on?
The last thing that I wanted to explain in the regard in regard of my like previous explanation is that people often, like journalists often ask me, like, how can you define like your political movement in terms of like liberal, conservative, left, right, and so on? And I genuinely try to explain it doesn't make any sense. You can't have a debate about like flat rate of income tax or progressive rate of income tax if you have political prisoners, if you have war, if you have a dictator who is poisoning his political opponents and so on. Like, we have to have tools to have this discussion, and so far in Russia we don't have these tools. So that's what I'm trying to say, like where we want to go. So maybe when we have achieved this goal, when we've put Russia in this like
into the square,
into the squares, and maybe me and Navalny will belong to different political parties. Like, I know perfectly, like, he's pro-gun rights and I'm against gun rights. So like, he's a very like pro-Second Amendment guy and I'm against. It doesn't matter at all now in these days, Russia.
That's interesting, that the gun rights thing. Give us a list of, if you've got them, of the sort of things that we in the Liberal Democrats believe, like human rights, LGBT, and that sort of thing, and the sort of disagreements that you expect to come up in the Russian population, all of whom want to be rid of Putin and in a democracy.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if we consider the current like Russian opposition movement, it's very united about the ideas that we have to get rid of Putin. But there are of course very different positions on like LGBT rights, or on like there is a debate if Russia has to be like a parliamentary or like presidential democracy, like a parliamentary presidential republic. And there is a debate on, like, I don't know, on many issues. But
the death sentence, for example, and that sort of thing, you know, the death penalty.
No, on death penalties, there is no debate. Everyone is against this penalty.
And what about Ukraine? Would everybody be united in sort of withdrawing from Ukraine or paying reparations, or what that is? Yeah.
Yes.
That won't be an issue.
There is no debate on this, and like there is no issue. Everyone realizes how important for a country is to have international recognized borders. So like everyone realizes that there is future for our country only if, well, there is no territorial debate with its neighbors. It's not only about Ukraine, it's also about Georgia and Moldova and so on.
Yeah, and just finally, before we open to your favorite part, which is the Q&A, you mentioned that you were getting your streaming and your message through to millions and millions of Russians. Are there enough within those institutions, the military, the courts, or the media and that sort of thing, to have a sway of opinion, a sea change of opinion that will back what you want? Are you reaching out to reform those institutions even now?
Humphrey, I'm very sorry. I just like started to read the questions and missed the point of your question. I'm very sorry about this.
Oh, that's it. I was just wondering if even now with the you're reaching out to the voters, as it were, that you're doing at the moment, whether you're going to sway enough opinion so that when you do get the chance, those voters are all soldiers, they are all working in the media, they're all in hospitals, they're all in to actually have that sea change of opinion on your side.
Well, we hope so. We hope so. So I mean, we haven't this experience. We've done it before. We've run successful campaigns. Like even like in 2020, it was already like very dark times in Russia. Like we managed to elect like many of our friends. Like we don't have we even don't have a political party. Like we attempted to register a political party like formally 9 times, and all these attempts were rejected. So our candidates had to run as like independents, not as members of a party which has a lot of setbacks in Russian political system, like giving a lot of like handicap to their rivals, and still we managed to elect our candidates in like many local and regional elections. So we are not afraid of this perspective. Everything will be better than Putin's.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. That is the tortuous part of the session over. I'm now going to hand you across to David Chalmers, our chair, who is going to chair you through the Q&A, Leonid.
Thank you,
so much, Humphrey, for your questions.
Yeah, well, I must say, I'm sure the same as everyone. We've all been sitting here listening with, you know, it's been really insightful and fascinating to hear you talk. And I know there are probably more questions going to come through now, because if people like me, they've sort of been sitting there really listening, you know, attentive to what you're saying. What comes across, I think, I mean, just so that, I mean, you are aware that we as a party, we have links with a party in Russia, which is Yabloko, which is our sister party. And even recently in the meeting that we had in Bratislava, they weren't able to attend, but they were able to sort of send a message to us and sort of engage with us. Before the other questions start coming in, I mean, one of my questions is really around how are you sort of working, you're outside of Russia at the moment, how are you working with some of those groups on the ground? Because obviously Navalny is in prison. Are there other, I mean, it must be a very difficult situation at the moment. You've described an authoritarian country where it isn't easy to have the sort of civil society that we have here in the West.
It is. Yeah. Look, so Putin has done like public expression of dissent, like literally impossible in the last few years. So you can't like go for like a political rally, like an anti-war rally. You will be beaten down, arrested, like and tortured or something like this. So we don't see much of like a public expression of dissent, which doesn't mean that dissent has gone. We do a lot of polling in Russia, and you know the numbers. Actually, the majority disapproves of the war, and the majority disapproves of Putin. Putin has managed to sell them the idea, though they don't exist. He's doing a very simple thing. There is a very small and active, like ultra patriotic, like pro-Putin minority. They are given all possible opportunities to speak out. Their voice is enormously amplified, and the voice of the anti-war and anti-Putin majority is being silenced with repressions. And so everyone inside the country has this feeling that everyone's around is only talking in support of the war, which is of course very depressing. So what we try to do is to fight against this depression, to connect people using social media, using some like guerrilla tactics, like I don't know, like putting leaflets in the streets or some signs that people see those leaflets and feel they're not alone. Someone in the next house is also like-minded and so on. We know that, like, I mean, when we were able to operate within Russia, when we had our network of offices all across the country that have been recognized the extremist and terrorist organization in 2020-21, and we had to shut down our regional network because otherwise every of our like co-workers, every of our staffers would just be arrested. But we know that the people are actually still there, and we educated a lot of people, like dozens or even hundreds of thousands young people, like participated in the activities of our regional offices. We had 45 of them in all Russia's largest cities as volunteers, as campaign staffers during like local political or civil rights campaigns and so on. We know all these people are still there. We are in touch with them over the internet using like modern technology, and we try to engage them in those civil activities that are still possible. Some of them are helping Ukrainian refugees. Some of them are like engaged in like some local activism in their cities and their regions, which is like not very political, but still gives experience of activism, of working together, of achieving some minor goals, but still like doing something and use thus resisting. So I consider our supporters in Russia as a kind of like a sleeping network now, but we know it is there.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Look, I mean, there's lots of other, let's go on to some of the questions that people have asked, because I think that there's a lot here. One of the questions that has come through is, is there anything that we can do to sort of help Alexei Navalny?
Yeah, and thank you so much for this question.
You know, because he is, you know, he's seen as very much a symbol. And you've explained this, you know, the terrible situation he is in at the moment. Is there anything that we can do?
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you so much for this question. So January 17th, so the day before yesterday, was the second anniversary of his return to Russia from Germany after his poisoning, after the assassination attempt against him, and the second anniversary of his arrest. So he is now under arrest for 2 years and 2 days. And on January 17th, we've launched an international Free Navalny campaign, which is like free.navalny.com, which is like a classical, which is like a classical like political outreach campaign. So with petitions, online and offline, like rallies, there will be many like Free Navalny rallies in more than 70 cities around the world in this coming weekend. It's all there on the website on this like free.navalny.com, with reaching out like to local politicians and so on, just like to put together as much political support, reaching out to celebrities who would speak up and so on and so on. How is it helping? It's raises Navalny's profile. It raises his like recognition, doesn't allow him to get forgotten, and it makes it for Putin more complicated, like to continue torturing him. We have to be reminded that on August 20th, 2020, when Navalny was poisoned, when Putin ordered his FSB people to kill him, he didn't order them to shoot him in his forehead. He ordered them to poison him with a poison that normally doesn't leave any traces. The plan was that the plane lands and there is a dead body, and every doctor would say it was just a cardiac arrest, a heart attack, something like this. And many people in Russia have been killed, and no one suspected anything about their death before the Bellingcat investigation about Navalny's poisoning. So there were many cases of successful Novichok attack. So it means that, I mean, Putin didn't want just to kill him. He wanted to kill him covertly. And this gives us a clue about what could be done to save or to protect Alexei Navalny, to keep him in the focus of international attention, to talk about him, to make politicians who talk to Putin talk about Navalny, and so on, so on, so on. Yeah, because like if Navalny is forgotten, then okay, I mean, he is now in custody of that very people who tried to kill him 2.5 years ago, and they will probably do it again. But if he is not forgotten, he is, well, relatively safe, and we can hope that his conditions will be eased. Also, like talking about Navalny, raising his public profile, participating in the Free Navalny campaign, increases like his value. Well, practically, cynically speaking, but at some point of time, the war will come to an end. There will be a huge negotiation. There will be like a package deal. Putin knows it, and while as a part of this package deal, like also the destiny of like political prisoners and like political system in Russia will be discussed. And if Putin knows that Navalny and other political prisoners, of course, as well, are valuable, and he will have a feeling that he might use them as like bargaining chips in the future, their lives are safe.
Okay. Just a point here. I mean, we've obviously got parliamentarians, our MPs. would it help, for instance, if our MPs were to raise the issue in the British Parliament?
Yes, absolutely.
The parliaments as well. Can we ask our sister parties to do that as well? So, in conjunction, along with the demonstrations you're talking about, that actually, if parliaments, we don't want to actually then give Putin the opportunity to say, look, Navalny is on the side of the West.
No.
But
it is not a problem at all. So it has been like a concern maybe like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, when I used to live in Moscow. I was invited many times to some, like, I don't know, dinners in embassies, and I would never go because I knew perfectly it would be used by the Kremlin's propaganda against me, against our movement. But now, I mean, they're still calling us terrorists, extremists, traitors, foreign agents, and so on and so on. And now we are talking about really physically protecting him, saving him, and everything's okay. So we don't care about how they would label us. They would do it anyway, but actually, international pressure, political pressure is very essential now.
You make a really good point there. I mean, that actually, to raise his value, as it were.
Yes.
Very, very good. I'm going to go on to have a look at some other points here that people have asked. I've got one here from Jonathan Fink. He says, how would a Navalny administration in Russia tackle the ingrained interests of the Siloviki and the ruthless defense of their interests by the FSB, as well as establishing rule of law and independent judiciary? I mean, I know that was sort of touched earlier on, but sort of go about that.
It's really very complex question. I mean, the Navalny's 2018 presidential program addresses it on 30 pages and in Russian. So I can't suggest you to read it, and I can't retell it in just a few sentences. It is indeed a very complicated problem. The way to tackle is to understand that those Siloviki, so the different law enforcement agencies, are not one corporation. They're very different. They are competing against each other. They also hate each other. There are FSB and Rosguardia and Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Defense and so on and so on. And these contradictions, we hope, can be used to weaken them. But at the end of the day, of course, they all have to be replaced. FSB, of course, is an enormously strong corporation, the ancestor of Stalin's NKVD and of Soviet KGB. So the almighty secret service. The way to reform it is to follow Germany's example, for instance, when they also have their secret service, the Bundesamt für Verfassungsschutz and so on, but they don't have any police capabilities, any rights. So they can do intelligence, like research, analysis, but if they want to arrest someone, if they want to indict someone, they have to go to the regular police and to prove their right. And this is something that we will change also in post-Putin Russia.
Just coming sort of in line with that question, it's a bit more of a tangible one. If you were to, this is from Julia Fletcher, she's asked, if you were to achieve power, how would you set about sorting out the FSB? And what would you do about the oligarchs? I mean, they've obviously had this power. Is that a bit more of a tangible question?
So, well, so once again, so FSB is now enormously powerful, just I mean by design. So it's a secret service. There is no public control, no parliamentary control over it, like not at all. Their power is unlimited, which of course leads to unlimited abuse of power. So these can be decided by making this Secret Service much weaker through legislation. And then there was a second part of the question, the oligarchs. These oligarchs, that's an easier question, I believe. Like, and there is no equal sign between like oligarch and a very rich person. An oligarch is a very rich person who intervenes into politics. Well, there are tools like about campaign money management and so on, which can prevent it. Like, I mean, you also have Aaron banks or whatever. So, but imagine, of course, like imagine Russia, a country like full of Aaron's banks, and that can intervene in like political life without any restrictions. These restrictions have to be imposed. We don't want to prohibit people to be successful businessmen. That's very good for a person to be a successful businessman. Only that, like, we need much more transparency and like much less political corruption.
There's quite a few questions here relating to Putin himself, and I mean, this is, you know, because we're looking at him, and there is this, you know, fascination of what this man has done and who he is. And you mentioned about the SFB, and we mustn't forget that Putin actually came from the KGB himself. Julie asked, do you think Putin actually thinks anyone believes his lies? The latest being that Ukraine attacked Russia. And the other, and in sort of with that is that Bert Bruin asks, assuming Putin has any ideals at all, hasn't he been one of his worst enemies because he came on the scene of federation of equals of Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine? Seemed eminently feasible. Now it's unthinkable. So it's really, you know, can you give us a little bit of insight into Putin himself along those questions? Do you think he believes his lies? How far do you think he'll go in this war and the war on the Russian people as well?
These are very good questions, and thank you so much for asking them. And the answer is, once again, not so simple. Of course, Putin himself not believes in everything he's saying, but to some extent, he definitely fell victim of his own propaganda. To some extent, he is dependent on, I mean, he actually doesn't use internet. There is a question like, is it true that Putin doesn't look on internet? Yes, he doesn't. He relies on FSB because he believes in the like almighty and like very powerful FSB, like ready to see everything. He very much relies on his famous briefing folders, like the daily briefing folder from the FSB. And in the last 20 years, the FSB guys, of course, learned what the boss likes, what makes the boss happy. So much in his folders became self-fulfilling prophecies because they know what he wants to read, what makes him happy. So they try to amend the content of these folders, of these briefing folders, in the ways that would make him happy. So this is exactly the definition of like someone becoming a victim of his own propaganda. So I believe like he quite generally believes in like this narrative about like Ukrainian neo-Nazism and so on in his books. What he doesn't believe in though is this like imperialism. I mean, look at Putin and all his friends, all his like inner circle. They have chateaus in France, yachts in Mediterranean. They educate their children in Switzerland or in UK. They have best apartments in Mayfair and Belgrade, and so on. They've kept more than half of their reserves in the Western banks and so on. Most of their hopes and most of their like expectations of the future were like with the West and in the West. They just learned that this Cold War era rhetorics resonates quite good with some people of the population, especially these elderly people who have also this resentment about the Cold War era, about the Soviet era, and being entirely hypocritical, they realized in a very Orwellian way, like in 1984, like this is a good thing to feed to the people's masses. Like this sells good through our propaganda. This idea about like the evil NATO and the evil West trying to destroy Mother Russia. They don't believe. Like Russian elite definitely doesn't believe in all this bullshit, but they are very they're sure that this fits their propaganda. But once again, to some extent, Putin is also victim of his own propaganda, of course.
Yeah, no, and that's really insightful. And just following on from that, I interviewed Andrei Zadchuk, who is the defense spokesperson for Holos, which is a Ukrainian party, just before Christmas. And something you said there actually fits exactly with what he was saying. He said, you know, these oligarchs, these people around Putin, they want, as you said, their yachts, their access to education, to housing, to in the West. And he suggested that actually a way of really hitting them is to sort of restrict the access to those. So the targeting sanctions against those. Do you think that is a good way of being able to try and exert influence?
Yeah, of course. That's what we are calling for. So we at the Anti-Corruption Foundation, we've put together like a list of almost 7,000 like Putin's friends, most like oligarchs that we suggest to sanction, in order actually to introduce like cliques, like split and cracks between Putin and those oligarchs, like really to create like economic leverage against them, and so on. So this is an important and essential part of our campaign.
Yeah, no, I know she can't be here tonight. Our foreign affairs spokesperson, Leila Moran, she's come down with COVID. But right at the very beginning, back in February of the war, she was the person in Parliament who actually really pushed for our government to actually start drawing up a list of Russian oligarchs who were supporting Putin, and actually how we might be able to sort of restrict their access to some of their wealth, etc., and put sanctions on them. So it's actually something which are, you know, you're talking here to the Liberal Democrats. We as a party, and I said Leila was the one who in Parliament really sort of the very beginning started to make that question. So when you ask, are there things that we can do, then that no doubt is also something to keep reinforcing that message.
Absolutely. Actually, please do endorse it, like any possible opportunity, like our position on the sanction policy. We've really invested our knowledge of Putinism into it. So we've been researching like Putin's corruption and how Putin's system operates for like 12 years. And when we've put together this list of almost 7,000 names, like of Russian elite, we've really put our knowledge about how the system actually operates, who is actually important for this, into this list. I'll be meeting the sanctions director of the FCDO on February 6th in London, just by the way. And during every meeting of this kind, we really talk to them and try to explain to them how important it is to like widen this list of American, European, and British personal sanctions against all these people.
Will you be coming to London personally?
Yes, I'll be.
Well, then I'm just thinking that list that you have, that might actually be a very good connection. We could let you know, our foreign affairs spokespeople know that you're here. Maybe we can arrange some meetings. We can take that up.
Absolutely.
Take that afterwards, because I think that this is a question which people have been asking, how they personally can do things. But we as a party, a political party within a group of other political parties, can certainly find ways to help you as well. I'm going to have another look down here through some other I'm going to go on to this one just because this is sort of ties in. How does Putin lose power? How do you think he because you said if he loses power, you don't see that the
we've discussed it before. So this question I think was asked before we touched upon it in our conversation with Humphrey in the beginning. And my answer was, I don't know how exactly. He makes a mistake, which is his last mistake. I mean, attack, like military aggression against Ukraine has been a huge mistake. Not only a crime, but also a mistake. He miscalculated. His intel was wrong. His expectations were wrong. His military projections were wrong, and so on. So he makes mistakes, and some of them will be allowed. But to increase the number of mistakes, we have to increase pressure from all possible directions. Well, if you ask me personally, what I guess is to be like the most probable scenario for how he loses power, I think this will be some kind of a like palace coup, like of internal conflict, because he's really demanding his generals to achieve the unachievable. He's really like trying to force everyone around him, just like, well, he's giving them tasks that they can't solve. He now appointed Gerasimov as the commander in chief of the military operation, and he was given a task like to liberate Donbass before end of March. Not gonna happen. It's not possible at all. Then what next? He will probably once again rotate his general and once again says this stuff. And at some point of time, like everyone really will be very, very tired of it. So, but once again, as we discussed, and you probably told, like we actually know there might be just like a black swan event, black swan type event. So just something like it was with the Arab Spring, something very random that will be just like just the last drop in the bowl. Like just will be just too much.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just tying in with that question, someone here has asked, Anne Thompson Alma has asked, how do you think the war in Ukraine might end? I mean, I know that's a very big question, but do you think that?
Yeah. So I mean, with this, so the morale of Russian army is low. Many people are refusing to fight. Very many people are avoiding draft, like millions of them actually. The first wave of mobilization has been a terrible disaster, like a logistical nightmare. And if they dare to announce the second wave, it will be much more of the disaster because so many people from the first wave died and others know about it. So that's how he loses. Like he's at some point of time, after more defeats, his army will just stop fighting because its morale will be exhausted.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, I mean, we know that people have left Russia. Do you think that they have any sort of plans to go back, or do you think that's now becoming their quite sort of size?
It's a question of time. It's a matter of time. So if Putin is defeated soon, within the next few years, then many of them who have left will return. If Putin will not be defeated soon, and many of them, of course, will not return back to the countries. They will stay in their new countries. They will root in these new countries. And then, well, what happened in the last year will make history as the worst brain drain in Russia's history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you? This question has been asked slightly before, but it is something which, I mean, how is it for Russians to watch YouTube? Can people be arrested this? Julia De Costa has asked this. Is it true that Putin does not look at, we used this earlier, doesn't look at the internet, relies on news from his lieutenants from the FSB? But
yeah,
do people...
yeah. So far, YouTube is not blocked. There are no restrictions on YouTube so far. There are talks about that there are talks that restrictions might be imposed in the future, but so far so good. And no one could be arrested for like watching YouTube, even if they're watching my channel and I'm an extremist and terrorist. There's like 9 criminal cases against me. Still, it's safe for people. This can change. Like, for instance, in Belarus, things are worse. Like in Belarus, you really could be like harassed for being subscribed to opposition channels. In Russia, it's not the case just because there are too many of them. Like, once again, we have like 15 million subscribers. Putin doesn't have a repression machine in place to go after like 15 million people, or even after 1 million people. So it's okay. The situation might change, but so far it's okay.
Because you mentioned about how people access their news. I mean, still the majority access their news through state media, don't they? And that
no, not anymore. Not anymore. So? I believe that now internet like is a major source of information for the majority.
Okay, that's interesting because we are. I mean, I've read elsewhere that it is still, and that's part of why for many Russians that they're just not aware of a lot of the real issues that are taking place. But if you are able to, do people use VPNs in Russia, or is that not?
Yes,
they do.
Yes, about 30% already. So
right,
quite many of them. Yeah.
No, I lived in.
I mean, I would wish the VPN penetration rate to be even better, but 30% is already sizable.
Yeah, no, I lived in China for about 10 years, and people use VPNs. They're a great deal to sort of get around and be able to access. I'm going to have a look down here and see what other ones have come in. So I've got a question here from Adrian. It says, "What is your relation to Open Russia?" I asked.
I can read. That's quite a different, quite a long question, and it really has to, very. It's not clear to many here. I believe it really requires a context. But to make long story short, our relations are okay. So we are different political organizations with different strengths and different weaknesses. Like we have more supporters, they have more money. That's why we focus on slightly different projects. So we focus more on working within the country with our supporters within Russia. They're more focused on helping like those who left the country and working with diasporas. But we are on good terms with them, of course.
Mm-hmm. Can you Open Russia, to those of us that don't know what that is, can you explain a little bit about that?
That's Mikhail Khodorkovsky's political organization.
Right. Okay. And is that based in Russia or outside?
No, it's based outside, in London and in Vilnius as well.
Okay, so it's one that you sort of we were talking earlier about working with different groups. Adrian has said, "Can you read the second sentence?" I'm just trying. It's gone. I think it's gone out of mine. So yeah.
No, Adrian, I read your question in full, but it's really, I think it would kind of require us to go too deep into this context.
I think if I could jump in, I think that question was a little bit like that rather good analogy you gave about you and Alexei possibly being in different political parties over gun law once you had got to a certain stage. And I thought you did that very clearly, Leonid, telling us that there's this one goal now is to get to the stage where you can actually absolutely have these disagreements.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And whilst David's looking for another, I just wondered if you could outline for us how the post-Ukraine diaspora is sort of moving. When I met you, they were moving into Latvia and Lithuania and Georgia and Estonia, and that is that now sort of consolidating into a sort of into a force to be reckoned with?
Yeah, they're not consolidating. I'm sorry, but they're not. They are different people. Many of them like moved abroad because, well, they have money, they have a like profession, like the IT guys, like IT people, and so on. They just like use this opportunity, so to say, just like to change their life because, well, they didn't want to get mobilized and so on. Then like some of them like are political activists who really just have to flee the country like to avoid being imprisoned. And then there are people who just like, I don't know, who just went nowhere and don't know what to do, and maybe like they will end up as Uber drivers. So they are very different, and it's not a homogeneous group. And I don't think that it is now like politically organized or someone really can pretend to represent this group politically. But of course, after some time, of course, also like political movements will arise, and the diaspora will become a political subject. But it's not now happening. People are more concerned with their like work permits, visas, where to live, kindergartens, and so on.
Finding a place to live and eat and get a wage. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was a question that came in, Leonid, re the Orthodox Church, and do you have anything to sort of say about that? Because we know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very, very funny. That's a question that people really ask very often in the West, and it's one more question where we see how different the societies are, like, and how we can't really judge the Russian society with the like patterns of the Western societies, while the Orthodox Church doesn't play any role at all. It is not influential. No one cares about what they say. Less than 3% of Russian population are churchgoers. Like 80% would describe themselves as Russian Orthodox, but less than 3% actually know anything about the like religion. So and actually like exercise any like religious duties or so on. So Putin invested a lot in Russian Orthodox Church because he had a hope that it might become like a powerful propaganda vehicle, and like if the priests will say like go to war, people will go to war. The priests are saying that. I mean, Patriarch Kirill is really a warmonger, but no one listens to him. He's not an authority for literally anyone.
Do you think that's sort of a hangover from the Soviet times?
Yes, it's of course it's a like heritage of the Soviet atheist past and so on. So there are many churches, they are empty, and well, the Russian Orthodox Church, of course, also did many mistakes, such as siding too much with Putin, which prevented it from becoming an important society institution.
Yeah, because I mean, we've seen that photo, or that painting or photograph of Putin sort of standing in church with a candle, and you know,
Putin is very patiently doing all of this. No one really cares.
Right. Okay. Interesting. I can see Humphrey's looking there. Are you going to come in there, Humphrey, with another question? I've got.
No, I was just chuckling because you just put a coach and horses straight into what was a large belief, and I love it when people do that.
I know.
Slay something that we all talk about.
Yeah.
This is such a great conversation. I was just wondering, you know, is it your own family situation, Leonid? Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah.
No, not really. I would prefer not to. So I don't think it's like we were talking about politics and like general matters and so on. Okay. We are doing fine, thank you. We are okay, and like that's people in Ukraine where we really have to care about their situation and their feminist and so on.
Mm-hmm. There are some questions that have come in, like around how do you think that there is talk at the moment of there being set up a war crimes criminal court in some way.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, what's your thought on that? I mean, you know,
my thoughts is it's useful. It's very important, like to collect evidence, to make like legal preparations. I am quite skeptical of the probabilities that Putin will actually face like a trial, like a Nuremberg trial or something like this. But still, all the activities in this direction, of course, help to pile pressure against him, and they are useful.
Yeah, good. I mean, Russia is such a huge country. How, you know, when we talk of Russia in like the one, there's one place, but obviously it being so huge, are there sort of differences in Russia to how you see towards Putin, towards the war, towards yourselves? I mean, where do you get most of your strength from and support in Russia, or is it right across the country?
It's one mistake that also many people are making, because like Russia is so huge, like 11 times, and people tend to think it must be diverse. Like, I mean, in Germany, you go to the neighboring village, they speak different language. I mean, they don't understand each other's accent. Yeah. Russia is enormously homogeneous. Enormously. Like they have the same school curriculum, they watch the same movies, they speak the same language with no regional accent in Kaliningrad and in Vladivostok, like 8,000 kilometers away. So culturally, because of the Soviet past, like Russia is very uniform. Of course, there are national republics, like national regions, like Chechnya, Tatarstan, and so on. Mm-hmm. Only in 4 out of all Russian 16 or 17 national republics, their title nation is actually a majority. And okay, in these regions, yeah, okay, they would have like signs in the national language on administrative buildings, but actually everyone would still speak Russian and still be part of the same like Russian cultural and political continuum. So Russia is surprisingly not diverse, which is not a good thing. We are actually very much vouching for decentralization. We support federalization of the country. Russia is constitutionally a federation. In fact, it's of course not. Regions have to differ from each other, have to make use of their differences, have to compete, like to attract like investors and so on. And now it's not the case in our country.
I just wondered if I could jump in, because you talked about Vladivostok, and that was fascinating about the lack of diversity. But many people forget that Russia is also an Asian nation, and that it has a border with, with China, with North Korea. It has a ceasefire, but not a treaty after the Pacific War with Japan, and there are disputed islands there, the Kuril or Northern Territories, depending where you're from. And it also has a border with the United States, which comprises of 2 islands that are barely 3 miles apart. Yeah. I mean, tell us a little bit about that, and a little bit about your views of the future of Russia that we've been discussing, and how that would slot into Asia.
So culturally, it's still Europe. It's if you go to any like Russian seas beyond Urals, so which is technically Asia, you will be surprised to see how European they actually look, how Eastern Europeans actually look like the city of Irkutsk on the Baikal Lake with this fantastic like wooden houses, or like the city of Novosibirsk, which is a large university city, like quite a modern one. they are not Asian, actually. Also, you don't have to forget that despite being so huge, like 90% or over 90% of Russia's population live in the European part, like to the west from the Urals.
Yeah, no, interesting. That border with China is so huge. What's your sort of, I suppose this is following up from Humphrey's question, sort of relationship with China? How do you see that? Because
well, now Putin,
we do see that as being really quite critical, the Russia-China relationship at the moment. I mean, from us sitting in the West, it's so. Yeah.
So now Putin has become enormously dependent on China. China is the largest, if not the only market for Russian oil and gas. Well, India is also an important market, but China is larger. China is the only supplier for all the like microelectronics, for all the sanctioned goods, which are, for instance, enormously important for the military supplies. Like they can't produce rockets or tanks without like Chinese equipment. So really, Putin has made Russia China's satellite, politically, economically, and so on, which is quite a problem, and which is very unnatural. Like, despite being so Asian, formally, geographically, Russia has always been Europe, politically, culturally, historically, like with Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and all these things, like with its fight against Napoleon, with its participation in the First and Second World Wars. Russia's been Europe, well, what's happening now when Putin has really cut almost all economic ties, not supplying, well, with the oil and gas embargo and with the frozen cultural exchange, scientific exchange, with no flights between Russia and Europe. Putin has done something which is very unnatural, which is contradicting the last 7 centuries of Russian history. So I believe when Putin is gone, we will have a chance to fix it. We will have a chance to heal it. But if it lasts for too long, then Russia's dependency, total dependence on China, will increase. And of course, this will lead to very unpleasant consequences.
No, thank you, Leonid. Look, I'm aware that it's getting late where you are, because you're like 2 hours ahead of us, and we've been talking for an hour and a half. I'm going to sort of call, because I think the questions we've had a lot coming through. It's been fantastic, and I know all the response of people is how interesting this has been. I'm just going to put it back to you, Leonid. Is there anything in these last few minutes that you would like to say? Some last sort of words, hearing from our questions.
No, I mean, thank you so much. It was a very interesting conversation, and the questions were also very interesting, and it's really important for me. And thank you for inviting me, Humphrey and David and Robert. So it's been useful, and I really value this opportunity, just like to share my thoughts and to answer your questions. So please do support the Free Navalny campaign and our sanction list, and yeah, let's stay in touch. It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said,
I'm sorry, my headset has discharged, but I hope you still can hear me. But I'm now on my computer's speakerphone.
Okay, no, we can hear you. And I was going to say, when you're coming to London, maybe we can liaise about setting up some meetings for you. So if you could let us know when you're likely to be here, and then we can look at putting something together for you.
Absolutely, thank you so much. So let's discuss it over email. So as I'll be in London on February 6th, like Monday in 2 weeks, I believe, and yeah, let's liaise.
Good.
Thank you, Leonid, so much for your brilliant insight, and coffee on me next time I'm in Vilnius.
Thank you so much. So sorry for I was not able to answer all the questions. They were actually incoming faster than I was answering them. I did my best.
No, you did brilliantly. You did really well. Thank you. As I said, for us, I think just the response from everyone found this really, really insightful. I will just say to everyone here, the European group, which is within the party, if you want to find out more what we do, it's www.ldeg.org, and you can join us for, be a part of the party. We also have a study trip coming up from the 27th of February to the 2nd of March over to Berlin to meet with our sister party, the FDP. We're meeting with their foreign affairs spokespeople, their energy committee and climate emergency committee, tours of the Bundestag, meeting with some of the other parties over there. Yeah, it's going to be a really full packed schedule. So I think there are details about that up on our website if you want to, or just email myself and Rob if you want to find out more about that. But just thank you very much, Leonid. Thank you, Humphrey, for arranging this and for having taken the initiative to bring this together. It's a really great evening. And thanks, Rob, for helping put it all together and be behind the scenes.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Leonid, David, Robert, everybody else. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.